And of course, the freedom to associate and the freedom to express require a natural freedom to trade with others without the use of force, each seeking mutual benefit that ends up giving a rise to society generally. Freedom is what promotes and is a prerequisite to peace. But genuine peace can exist only in free societies where truly voluntary and not compliant actions govern civic responsibility. You see, peace requires self-ownership, not a slave society where there may not be warfare because force is imposed. But for peace to exist, self-ownership and the right to determine the terms of one's own life requires, again, that we respect the property of others, even if such is adverse to our own interests. In other words, if someone is going to build a home in front of your home and block the view that you had to the ocean, we need to understand that if we are focused solely on the idea that we want to protect our property value, even though it comes at the expense of someone else's property right, we will all end up with neither property values nor property rights. It is respecting what others want to do with their lives and their property that gives each of us the opportunity to lead a life of our own. George Washington said that private property and freedom are inseparable. Well, he's right. But most Americans have come to forget what private property is. Most people think that private property is a thing. It's a land or a farm, maybe a car or your own home. But private property is much more than that. You see, private property begins with your hand. This is my hand. I choose its action, and I possess my hand. But private property begins with our very person. Our persons are our own private property. But it's more than that. It's our thoughts. Our thoughts are our private property. We need to be free to determine the terms of our life in order to develop those thoughts fully. And our expressions become our private property. So it's our person, our thoughts, our expression. It's our action. Private action is private property. Sometimes that action results in the creation of a thing, or we trade for something as a result of our work energy. But when that thing is taken from us by the government, whether it's our land, our houses, our television sets, or our books, it begins to affect that chain. If our property can be taken from us, we begin to act differently. This is why the Soviet Union failed. People didn't act in a societally beneficial way because it didn't benefit the individual. So when we seek acting in our own interests because our own interests are denied to us, we end up expressing ourselves differently, thinking differently, and until one day we wake up and we look at that hand that used to be ours and we find out that our hand is controlled by the power of the collective state. We are to do what we are told. The terms of our life is determined for us. The prerequisite for American liberty requires that the citizenry begin to reacquaint themselves with the terms of the Constitution. It is only that way that we can assure the continuation of a democratic republic and that where we can commit ourselves to doing what's necessary to secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and to our posterity. The American culture is experiencing the consequence of a decline of individual responsibility and a rise in dependency. The principles that guide an honest economy, genuine free trade, have been abandoned. Instead, we live with increasing subsidies, barriers to entry, government regulation, and government intervention into the lives of what could be a free citizenry. The ethics of special interest politics have vested power in big government liberals and big government conservatives. The consequence of this decay have been the evolution in the purpose of American social, political, and economic institutions. For instance, think about charity. In a free society, charity receives contributions from some in order to help others. In essence, charity is both a broker and an agent of benevolence. But in modern society, many charities are 501c3s that seek grants of coerced tax revenue in exchange for their regulatory compliance. The consequence is that the incentives for charitable action are shifted from genuine benevolence to creating and meeting the needs of a growing caseload dependent upon the receipt of ever larger government grants. Coercive sources of money are incompatible with benevolent giving. Shifting charitableness from benevolence to bureaucracy contributes to social decay. The cause of this decay is not accidental. It can be traced, in part at least, to the political globalist movement. Now, as opposed to 40 years ago, there is a documented plan for the creation of a global democratic collective, and it is called sustainable development. What is sustainable development? Well, the United Nations, who coined the term, defines it this way: it is meeting today's needs without compromising future generations to meet their own needs. Well, think about that. Suppose our forefathers had not used the whale oil that brought light to the homes of a few homes in America and that brought wisdom and knowledge to the young people of that generation, and had decided instead to save it for us. Well, we might still be living in the dark. You see, human ingenuity, the greatest resource on the planet, takes problems and solves problems. Fossil fuel has brought to all of us an improving life, and now we're asked to stop using it in order to save it for future generations, as though those who come behind us, presumably living in a free society, would be incapable of improving their own lot. Such folly. You see, this concept, in fact, nearly these precise words, are not new. They come from the 1977 Soviet Constitution. The flowing and flowery words didn't work for them, and there's no reason to think that sacrifice will bring an improving world for us. At Freedom 21 Santa Cruz, we define sustainable development more accurately. We say that sustainable development is the process by which America is being reorganized around the central principle of state collectivism, using the environment as bait. This is being done while indoctrinating and preparing our children to live in a state-run collective. Now, what I'm going to do is define a few more terms and examine the operation of sustainable development in America and show how sustainable development is a program to reinvent American government. And I'll conclude by summarizing the risks and the opportunities of our time. But throughout, I will show and offer ideas on how you can advance individual liberty and equal justice in your own community. What is collectivism? Well, in short, collectivism is suppression of individuality by the state. What you think, what you do, how you express, what your job might be, what you eat, where you go, how you get there, all are components of what a truly collective society becomes. Well, what are the components of creating a collectivist society in the 21st century? Well, I think there are four such components. The first is a capacity for imperialism. But unlike times before us, imperialism today, to make an effective global collectivist system, requires a military force powerful enough to control the entire world. You see, as long as there's one country shining as a beacon for the rest of the world, the tyrants around the world are held to a standard to which